the information on the internet is based out of mainly probably Portland or Seattle or North Carolina or something like that, where there's actually humidity, they can take full sun. However, we are the desert of Idaho, if you think about it, because if you drive east from here and head towards Mountain Home, what do you run into? Sagebrush. You drive south past the interstate, pretty hot, pretty dry. So a little history about Treasure Valley and some of the soils here, as well as the dry heat. We have very little humidity in the heat of summer. We have colder winters than some of these other climates. And the last really hot summer we went through sure tested some of the maples in the sunnier applications that I see around the city. So really, in all honesty, of what I've seen over many, many years of being in this business is these Japanese maples really prefer shade in the afternoon. I would love to be in the shade in the afternoon myself. And that's basically the difference of the internet versus Southern Idaho. If there was a website for Southern Idaho, talked about trees, that would be epic. I don't think there is one out there. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the internet for information about Japanese maples. Remember, we're in a really hot, dry climate with very little humidity. So I think today's trees that we'll talk about in Japanese maples, I mean, we've got over 90 varieties of Japanese maples coming in this season alone. We sold 797 Japanese maples last year in the retail division. So they will definitely work here. It's just finding that right application where they fit in. We actually have a Japanese maple probably for every exposure. That even means sun. They don't all necessarily have to be red Japanese maples. As long as you've got a spot for a Japanese maple, there's a multitude of colors. Chartreuse, greens, shades of green, reds, purples, endless varieties. Start off with Japanese maples for sun, because I know everybody's wanting to know which ones will take the sun. It's actually varieties of Korean maples that will take the sun. They don't like reflected heat though. So if you have them on the west side or the south side of your house and it's right up next to the wall, and in the afternoon that sun rolls around and reflects off the window or off the wall, more than likely that's going to bake that Japanese maple. Really takes about 3 years for a tree to settle into the ground, and that's with good deep soaks through the heat of summer for it to get well established where there might not be a lot of burn. However, last summer I had trees in my yard that were planted 10 years in the ground and they were burning up. So I had to put shade cloth over the top of them so that they wouldn't be brown, because brown is not really a good color to talk about when you're talking about Japanese maples. Possibly potatoes that are brown, but Japanese maples, no. So keep that in mind. Shade, sun, factors. So the varieties that will take full sun, Korean maples, actually listed as zone 4 once established, 30 below zero. A couple of the varieties that we will have in here in the spring would be Northwind. So the new leaves start out rich red purple. As the weather starts to warm up later in the spring, you're going to dissipate that color out and it's going to go into more of a green tone. Also, information on the internet about heights. Those are for areas that can take the full sun. Keep in mind, we've got to put some of these varieties in the shade. So your heights on those aren't going to get as tall as soon as they would say on the internet. So 2 varieties that will take full sun without reflected heat, Korean maples. Northwind, one called First Flame. First Flame starts out red-orange in the spring. As the weather, like I said, gets warmer, you kind of dissipate away from that color. You get back into green tones through the summer, and generally both of those varieties will have explosive fall color. A lot of the fall color usually starts in here sometimes towards mid-end of September into October. That's a good time to really view it. So those are the best varieties for full sun. I know everybody's favorite color is red. I don't see a lot of successful Japanese maples over the long term in full sun. All right, good category to cover, full sun right there. We'll see if we can kind of come back around and see if there's maybe other varieties, but really those are the best ones. Like I said, you got to keep them out of the reflected heat. If you can create a berm for them so you can create better drainage. Another thing that I have found in my own yard is to put maybe not so much mulch, but use a ground cover plant that you can put over the root zone. So the root zone is cool, but yet the top is in a sunnier application. that tends to work pretty good, unless we get scorching heat like we just went through. That did a lot of damage to maples. And really, once a maple starts to struggle in heat and stress, then that's just gonna add insects and bugs that are gonna wanna get into that tree a little bit easier than something that was healthy, kind of like humans. Good example. Okay, those are the sun-loving ones. Let's reverse this and go into best for deep shade. So these are areas that have no sunlight, really, maybe a little filtered light, possibly below an evergreen, maybe below another deciduous tree that's already leafed out. One of my all-time favorites is the floating clouds called ukagumo, white and green. And green looks like somebody's taken green paint and thrown on the leaf. It's spattered across. On average, because this one's in a shady environment, you're looking about 8 feet tall, maybe 5 feet wide. It's a variety that kind of has little smaller twiggy branches, which you can thin out if you would like to. But that is a favorite of mine. I've got one in my yard. Number 2, all-time fave, golden full moon maple, Acer shiroswanum. Beautiful leaf, chartreuse color in the spring. Chartreuse, lime green. Flowers on them sit straight up, and then when the seed pods develop, samaras, the seed pods will actually sit straight up, and that's one way to tell full moons versus palmate Japanese maples. The palmate seeds will actually hang down. On average, 8 foot tall, possibly 6, 7, 8 feet wide. Fall color on those again, outstanding, as long as there's some sunlight on them in the fall. That's the tricky part. If you stick it below a spruce or a pine and there's no direct sun in the fall on them, you're not really going to get the fall color that they show in the books. The fall color in the books really is, again, back to those areas of Portland and Seattle that really have those nice, slow, cool down temperatures. Hard freezes in Idaho tend to ruin fall color. And then you look out one morning and you've got brown leaves. Back to the potato thing again. Okay, another one, emerald lace, a lace leaf. Kind of a limey green, real delicate leaf to it. The lace leaves are the mounding varieties. A lot of times people say, well, how do I keep it low? On lace leaves, any lace leaf, regardless of the name, if you want height sooner than what it will do on its own, you literally pull a branch up, you stake it to what height you want, and then over time it fills it out from there and cascades back down. People that want to keep them low, I say, well, when it's young, you can take the tops off that are arching out, cut those off, but keep in mind, if it's not going to go up, it's going to go out. So if you're in an area that's only 4 feet wide and you're sticking a plant in there that wants to get 10 feet wide, what do you think it's going to look like in a few years when you're constantly pruning it back to keep it in check? So maybe try to find a little bit more height out of it. You can still create that really cool cascading down look. And then, especially in a dark area, I wouldn't want to take a red Japanese maple and pop it into a dark area because it's not going to have any red on it for long because the red is developed by the sun. I'm not going to get a sunburn if I'm in the shade all the time. So those are the 3 varieties right there for deep shade. Obviously there's more. Like I said, we've got 90 plus varieties coming in this spring. It'll take 2.5 months probably to get them all in here. So I'm only touching on a few of them today. Spring interest. Great idea there. You know we always have beautiful, decent springs. If you can't bank on a stunning fall color, because Mother Nature never plays nice with Treasure Valley, plan on spring interest. One of my favorites is Katsura. Orange, yellow, spring leaves, beautiful color. Then again, won't keep that color all season. However, you'll go back in the fall, if we have a nice fall, to that same orange, yellow. Katsura really gets about 8 foot tall. If it loves you, it could get up to 12. Keep in mind, like I said last week, plants don't really stop growing, they slow down with age. So another one, Orange Dream. These are hard to find. I got a couple of people this year that'll have a few for us, a couple of different sizes, but Orange Dream, golden yellow in the spring. Green bark. Beautiful plant. I might even have to put one in my yard. This one, about 8 feet tall again. You can keep these smaller. Best time really to prune Japanese maples is in the summer. If you prune them this time of year, they could bleed. Sap could come out of them. Probably not going to injure the plant, but really you don't want sap draining out of your plants this time of year. So spring interest, 2 of them, Katsura, Orange Dream. Obviously, like I said before, there's more. These are definitely favorites. Red maples, everybody's favorite color. We have several varieties in uprights. We have several varieties in lace morning sun application or filtered light application. They can take full sun up until about the middle of June. From the middle of June till the end of September is when it's going to get really hot in this climate. Dry heat, no humidity. Like I said, the first 3 years it can burn pretty good in a hot summer, unless there's good deep soaks. Not every day. That is one of the keys, is do not water your plants every day. Japanese maples, deep and infrequent watering or uniform level of moisture. They tend to work pretty well under both of those situations, but little light drinks of water every single day is probably not going to be, it's going to be too much water, especially in poorly drained soils. Japanese maples definitely need well-drained soil. If you're in really heavy clay, that means digging deeper, wider holes, a lot of organic matter, working in with your hands or a shovel to create better drainage beyond the root ball. Wells around the plants, especially right at the edge of the planting area itself. You've got your hole dug this wide, your root ball is here. I would suggest that berm needs to be right at the edge of that root ball because that's where all your roots are at the first year. Mulch over the top for sure before you go out and water. Feel it with your finger, a couple inches down. It's better to underwater than overwater, just like eating. Better to undereat than overeat. Keep that in mind. Fire glow, beautiful one, a actual true red in the heat of summer. Once established, it's about 10 to 12, maybe 15 feet tall. It'll have a strong canopy that'll branch out. Eventually with age, it'll be a kind of a rounded habit to it. Fall color is brilliant red as well. Another very nice one is Sherwood Flame, strong format. A little deeper cut on the lobe, about the same height. A little faster growing than Fireglow. Fireglow is a little slower growing variety, so if you have some of a smaller area, maybe that's not a bad idea to put a little slightly slower growing variety in. We're going to throw one in there, it's green, but it's Osakazuki. It has a large leaf similar to a Fireglow, but it's a bright green. To me, anything in a green Japanese maple is going to have far better fall color than anything in a red, because simply something in a red, you're going to change another shade of red, which you've already seen. But a green will come alive, possibly with a kaleidoscope of fall color. Osakazuki, been called fire engine red. What a nice treat. Red Dragon, lace leaf, red. Been reported that it might keep a red even in a shadier application. That's a lace leaf that's relatively slow growing. That's why it's really hard to find. A lot of people want to bring in the varieties of Tomukiyama and Nabashidari, ever red, just because those are faster growing varieties. But for us, in our climate of being in a shady application or a smaller spot to put a Japanese maple, possibly a slower growing variety isn't a bad idea. Red Dragon, one of our popular ones. Another fun one that we don't see a lot of is Ryusen, R-Y-U-S-E-N. Larger leafed, weeping However, you need to stake it for height, because if you don't, if it comes in and it's 3 foot tall, it might get a little bit of height each year. If it, like I said, if it doesn't go up, again, it's going to go out. So if you've got a narrow spot, put it in the ground, get it established, find a leader or a branch you can stake up, get some height out of it so the growth goes more this way instead of that way. And that's a fun one, Ryusei. Should have great fall color, the fact that it's green. So the sizes of Japanese maples we are going to bring in this year are going to be 1 gallons up to 95 gallon sizes. So there should be a great range of sizes and varieties. One of my all-time favorites for a green upright is Hoyoku. I love it. It's a medium green. Pumpkin orange in the fall. A green bark to it when it's young, that might go away in time. Those are kind of hard to get. We'll have 3 or 4, but if you can do a mixture of Japanese maples, you throw in your Shiroswanums, you work in your fire glows, you pop in an Osakazuki, the range and the character of all of those grouped together, plus they work super good with great perennials like hostas and ferns. One more fun category for Japanese maples is what I call them a strap leaf. Thin like bamboo, not bamboo, but looks like bamboo. Airy, wispy, popular terms when people are looking for plants. Kodo no itu, thin, green leafed. 8, 9, 10, possibly 12, 15 feet tall, but real airy, lacy foliage, should be gold in the fall. Another nice, fun one. Sun, morning sun, shade would be your best bets. We basically have a maple for every exposure. Last one, rough bark Japanese maple, a fan favorite of people that love to bonsai. You do not have to bonsai this plant. However, the bark on it alone is the winter interest. As it gets older, it gets warty and really rough. Kind of like Don Johnson's face in Miami Vice. Green leaf, 15 feet tall, 8 feet wide. The fall color could range from reds to golds to yellows. The last section we're going to talk about here today would be the dwarf. So a lot of times when people come in and they say they want a dwarf Japanese maple, turns out they're actually talking about a weeping variety. Dwarf is one of those words that I think a lot of people associate with it going to stay really small or something like that, but really all dwarf is amount of growth a year. You could have something that grows this much a year and something that grows that much a year. Dwarf trees over time could be 6 by 6. That a lot of people don't think is a dwarf sized plant, but if the mother plant is 30 feet tall, 6 by 6 would be considered dwarf. So one that comes to mind is Rhode Island red. Grows in a rich purple red in the spring. Tends to fade a little bit in the heat like most reds do. Grows itself up, rounded canopy, could someday be 6 feet tall and 6 feet wide if it's in the right application. And what I mean by right application, like I said, I can't say it enough times, is keep them out of the hot afternoon summer sun. That would be the best results for this area. And last but not least, next week's class will be on my favorite subject. I think a lot of people know me, you'll know exactly what that is. So until then, thank you for listening.